If you want to know how important learning society is, really all you have to do is look at the single most important fact about human history that you are never taught in high school and probably have not been taught at Columbia. And it is simply this, that from Roman times, when we have the first good global data on human standards of living, until sometime between 1800 and 1820, there is no net increase in human standards of living. That the vast majority of the human race over that whole period eats only staples, lives with their animals in barn-like conditions, has basically one suit of clothes that they take off and put on layers during the various seasons, has no significant medical care, has no significant opportunities for travel, and entertainment consists of what's provided by biology and probably getting drunk no more than twice a year. From 1820 on, there is this absolutely extraordinary change where people today uniformly, at least in almost, I would say the majority of the world now, given what's happened in Asia, live better than this small crust of aristocrats lived historically. The second important thing I think to understand, and that's really why you talk about a learning society, is that the standard stories are all about Thomas Edison or Galileo or historic scientific figures developing knowledge. It is not knowledge development that matters. Knowledge development actually in this history that I talked about really starts to take place dramatically in the 17th century. That it is the diffusion of knowledge that matters. And the reason you almost certainly know that that's true is that if you look around the world, there are extraordinary variations in standards of living. They are not associated to any significant extent, especially where you compare the formerly socialist economies who did a lot of capital formation with investing in embedded capital. They are really based on differences in the ability of individual societies to put knowledge to work. You see that most dramatically, obviously, in China and in some of the other formerly socialist economies after they reform. But the main point is that the knowledge that these economies and firms and institutions within these economies are putting to work is globally available. You can buy the same textbooks that you read anywhere in the world. You can get the same scientific journals that new discoveries are described in anywhere in the world. There's not a lot that's very secret. And actually, if you look at the firm level, when firms really have very successful projects to improve productivity and reduce costs, they tend not to use very advanced technologies. It's not the breakthrough technologies that matter. It's seasoned technologies that are 5 to 8 years old. So it's not that you don't need the creation of new knowledge, because sooner or later, obviously, if you didn't have it, you would exhaust the existing supply. But what matters for economic and social performance is taking advantage of the knowledge that's out there and diffusing it in those economies. And again, I think the empirical evidence for that is just so painfully obvious, it's bizarre that nobody focuses on that. The third thing I think that is clear when you think about it is that adoption and diffusion of knowledge takes place not in markets, but in institutions. Government institutions and private institutions. So having big firms that in particular are stable so that a knowledge base doesn't erode over time or disappear when the firm disappears is absolutely critical to this long-run development and is probably much more important than having a firm that is forced to face rigorous competition in a market environment.
Anybody concerned with increasing standards of living ought to be, how do we increase learning? But that's not what economics has been concerned with. It's been concerned with the small part, not unimportant, but a small part about capital accumulation and the increased efficiency in the static allocation of goods and of resources. So they've left out the vast majority, the big question that really has been the major determinant of the increases in standard of living. So that was sort of the beginning point. And now if you have that as the beginning point, then the next natural question is, how do you enhance the ability of our society to learn? Which means how does that learning occur? What affects that learning process? Obviously, that's a hugely difficult and complicated subject, and we try to go through various aspects in the book. So just a couple general remarks that we make in the book. The first is the standard theory focusing on allocative efficiency. The basic idea of Adam Smith was that markets were efficient. And if you look at the Arrow and DeBrew gave the proof of Adam Smith's conjecture about markets being efficient. The notion of markets being efficient was they were led as if by an invisible hand to the well-being of society. Well, the Arrow and DeBrew proof of the efficiency of markets was quite remarkable in that they assumed that knowledge was fixed, that there was no learning. So the standard paradigm on which a lot of policy is based begins with a theory that says knowledge is fixed, there's no learning. Really quite remarkable. And one of the papers I think that Bruce and I are most proud of is a paper where we showed that the reason that the visible hand often seems invisible, or so often seems invisible, is that it's not there. That the market is in general not efficient. We did it in the context of markets with imperfect information, markets with imperfect risk markets. But one of the insights is that information can be thought of as a particular kind of knowledge. It's information, what we use the word information, it's knowledge about a particular thing. We're talking about a much more broad notion of knowledge of how do you produce things, which is a broader concept, but really has some of the same framework of understanding. And so that theorem that the market is in general not efficient when there's imperfect information is also true about knowledge. That there is no presumption that markets on their own will be efficient in the allocation of resources to the production of knowledge in any aspect of economic activity where learning is involved. So to give you one specific example, one of the issues we focus on, one of the ways people learn is they learn by doing, by producing. Now that means that when you think about the value of producing, it's not only the value of the goods and services that you're producing, but it's the value of the knowledge that you get, the learning that you get, that lowers your cost of producing in the future. And the question is, does the market solve that problem efficiently? And a lot of our book is devoted to an analysis of that broad issue, and to say, no, it does a miserable job at doing that.